scripture this morning is 1 John 5, verses 4 and 5. For every child of God defeats the evil world, and we can achieve this victory through our faith. And who can win this battle against the world? Only those that believe that Jesus is the Son of God.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Everybody doing good?
Yeah. Fantastic.
Good. I was late. For some reason, there was a stop sign on this side road that we took that I wasn't familiar with, and I didn't realize that was this road, 300. So I kept on going, and all of a sudden, haven't we been on this road too long? And the next thing I know was, what's that church coming up? We're in Bippus. So we just kind of did a big loop and came on back and made it in time before we started. Well, I bet you guys are thinking, how come Jeannie didn't read from Revelation this morning? She wasn't in Revelation. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a detour from Revelation for a week or so. Just for some fun. We've spent 19 weeks so far looking at the book of Revelation, and specifically the name of that book is The Revelation of Jesus Christ. And we're in the second half of the tribulation. So we've studied the letter to the 7 churches. We've gone through a couple of chapters that took us into the throne room of God in heaven. The Lamb came forward, remember our Savior Jesus Christ. The Lamb was the only one worthy and qualified to open the scroll. What was the scroll? Remember what that was? Legal document. It's the title deed to the earth. And it was sealed, with 7 seals. And so we started opening the seals. In the first 6, we found a whole lot of judgments. And we're at number 7 at this point. And so we're going to take a little break from that. Although it's interesting that there were 7 churches, there were 7 seals. The 7th seal consists of 7 trumpet judgments, and the 7th trumpet judgment consists of 7 bowl judgments. So we'll get to all of that eventually. But we've seen some pretty ugly judgments, haven't we? Judgments that are going to happen during the tribulation. Vicious judgments where a third of the earth has been destroyed, a third of the population has been killed. Actually, it's far more than a third when you consider the total for all of the different things that have happened. And there's more judgment coming. Believe it or not, it only gets worse from here. So we've also talked about the belief that we, as Christ followers, will not be here on the earth during the tribulation, right? And that's good news. We won't be here. Either we've died before it's happened, or we've been caught up to meet the Lord in the air. In other words, we go to heaven in the rapture prior to the start of the tribulation. So, how is your faith in the Lord? How is your faith in the Lord? How's your faith doing? I mean, does all of this stuff sometimes scare you? It's a little scary. Do you force yourself to think about the rapture because then it's like, okay, then I don't have to be here during that. Just to not have to think about all of that. Or what about family and friends that don't seem to know the Lord? And if that tribulation happened sometime soon, they'd have to go through some of this stuff, or all of it. Are you truly good with all of that? Or does it get to you sometimes and you wonder, is God, is he really fair? Is he caring? Because it's hard to see some of that judgment sometimes. Or maybe you're all squared away with the end time stuff, and that's good. But things that are happening right now in our world can get you thinking, is my faith strong enough? Or maybe you wonder, is God really, really in full control of everything that's happening? You see things falling apart around you. You get worried about your kids or grandkids or your own future. You know, and there's these things that are happening in our society, like what's this whole thing about the Furbies? You know what, you got kids that feel like they're a puppy or a cat today, and so if the parents go along with it, you got to put up with it all day in school, right? If they signed to, you know, that's what they are today. Or speaking of schools, what about some of the curriculum that's being pushed? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, ask Melanie, ask Brooke, ask Angie. Today you can ask her. What's happening? What's that all about? Or how about the new laws regarding children that are being passed in California? One that just got passed, AB 495. It's gone through the state Senate. They're expecting Governor Newsom to sign it into law. And this bill is supposedly putting in place a protection for children of immigrants by people being able to take them without parents okay and say, okay, you can come home with me, I'll take care of you so that you don't get shipped off and sent back to country or into who knows where with your parents. I mean, without parental knowledge, that's okay, and that's law there now. Well, as soon as the governor signs it. I mean, that's just simply setting up all kinds of bad stuff. You ever heard of child trafficking? I mean, there is things like ill-intentioned adults out there, right? But those are the kind of laws that are being, or there's another California law, Bill 1955, that prohibits school staff from informing parents about their kids' gender preferences or name changes or pronoun changes. Although there's a lawsuit in Michigan happening right now because that happened, and the parent just happened to find out after several years of their daughter being in counseling in school. He found out, the dad found out accidentally, and now there's a lawsuit going. Or maybe you saw the new law in England, where a person cannot pray with another person in public, even if they're both consenting to that. That is now illegal in England. Crazy, isn't it? Then there's the big push of digital IDs. England is now saying that soon that will be a law, that everybody has to have a digital ID in order to work in Great Britain. Now, digital ID. You first think of that and you think, well, that would make life convenient, right? That means I have one ID, covers my driver's license, my bank account, I mean everything. Of course, if you lose that one thing and you don't know how to drive, you still can't get into your bank now, you know, or whatever. But there's that one digital ID and it sounds kind of convenient. But think it through. That means that one central location has everything about you, and that one central location can shut you down. Now, that one central location is who? Well, probably government. Here's how it looks in China. According to reports, this is already in place in China. If a traffic camera catches you of jaywalking, you are ticketed, and the money is just removed from your bank account for the fine. You're not even involved. Okay? And then that digital ID system there in China, it has your picture, it has your blood type, it has your genetic code, it even has your gait of your walk. So if the camera doesn't happen to catch your face, they can still identify you by your walk. And then that your picture gets sent to your neighbors so they know you're a bad person. Then it affects your social credit score. And if your social credit score falls below a certain level, you can't get on a train. You can't buy something to drink from a local vending machine. You can't play video games, and so forth. So how's your faith in the Lord with all of that happening in our world around us? Now, when any of you guys can't sleep, do you get up and you get on social media on your phone or anything? How many people do that? Yeah, a lot of people do, right? Somebody did that last night, and I got up this morning, and there was a thing, and I thought, well, that's actually a pretty good saying. I should share that this morning. And here it is. they put this on Facebook after they saw it. It said, either your faith will separate you from the world, or the world will separate you from your faith. That's a pretty good one. That's a pretty good one. See, whether you're a new Christian or whether you've been walking with the Lord for decades, if you're a pastor, if you're a missionary, doesn't matter. Every single one of us struggle to one degree or another with our faith. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, to one degree or another, one time or another, it changes. So why do we have challenges? Always just trusting God quickly and easily. Why do we have a challenge with that? I mean, there's many sermons have been shared on the topic, many classes taught, many books have been written. And if you stop and think about it, we know the creator of the universe, right? I mean, he simply spoke all of this in existence, and he set up all of the systems that keep everything working in our world. And he did that in 6 days. He chose us before the foundation of the world to be his. He knew us in our mother's womb. He has sovereign control over everything that happens in our daily life, but yet we still sometimes struggle having strong faith in all situations. I mean, I'm kind of assuming you guys deal with that. I do. You know, that's a little bit rough. So, let's talk about that today. Let's talk about strong faith. This morning, we're going to look at a passage in the Gospel of Mark where we're going to discover 7 faith truths that if we put them into practice, we can have victory over this broken world. Now, you probably have picked up on the number 7 this morning, right? We've talked about it before in Revelation. There's 7 letters to the churches, 7 seal judgments, 7 trumpet judgments, 7 bowl judgments. And remember in Scripture, 7, the number 7, is the perfect, complete number. How many notes are in a musical scale? 7. How many colors in the basic spectrum? 7. Okay? 7 is a complete number. It's a perfect number in Scripture. So today we're going to find 7 faith truths. Okay? So let's turn to Mark chapter 5. And we're going to spend a little time in Mark chapter 5 this morning. We're going to start in verse 21. And we'll read it all the way through, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of break it down a little bit. But just to give you a little context before we start reading it, Jesus and his disciples, what's happening here is they are traveling. They're traveling, and Jesus is teaching. The disciples are learning. They're encountering different situations along the way in these verses. So we're going to start in verse 21. We'll go all the way down to the end of the chapter. All right. And when Jesus had crossed again into the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, their church, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be well and live." And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged around him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. After Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." And while he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" So now we're back to the original story that we started at the beginning of the chapter there, at the beginning of these verses. So verse 36, but overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not fear, only believe. And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. You know, they used to pay people to do that, right? So in the Hebrew society, they would pay people to come and wail and weep and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that's who's there doing that. In verse 39, and when he entered, he said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him, but he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha Kumai, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age, and they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Okay, so we've got several verses there, and we're going to go through some of that, and we're going to see how we can build strong faith. Wherever you're at, wherever your faith is, I think we can all be stronger with our faith in the Lord. So look for things here that you can use in your life. The very first thing that happens to come out of these verses in verse 22 and 23 is strong faith is preceded by desperation. That's number one on your handout. Strong faith is preceded by desperation. So we go back to the story about the leader of the Jewish synagogue. And he's talking to Jesus, and what was his daughter's situation? She's sick, but not just sick, she's sick unto death. What would be your reaction if that was your child? Would you be desperate to find the right help? Sure, we all would. We'd be desperate to have our child restored to good health. And this story is very interesting because many Jewish leaders didn't like Jesus, right? They wanted to actually put him to death eventually. But here, a leader within the Jewish synagogue became desperate because of his little girl's health. And so that desperation caused him to turn to one that he had heard about. Turn to the one that he believed was the one that could help his little girl. His daughter was 12 years old. And we see in verse 42, we see that as well. Jairus sees her, even though she's 12, he sees her as his little daughter. Fathers, isn't that the way you see your daughters? Right? They're always your little girl. You always want to take care of them. No matter how old they get, you want to take care of and protect them. So when something happens to them, you're desperate to take care of them. So what kind of things cause us to become desperate? In our life today, what kind of things cause us to be desperate? Financial? You know, being able to make sure we can get everything done on our plate. Those things cause us to be desperate. If our family is fighting, does that cause desperation? Being alone sometimes can cause desperation. That big list that I started with of stuff this morning, some of that can cause desperation. These times where we become desperate, those are an opportunity to build our faith. Desperation. Strong faith is preceded by desperation. Let's go to number 2. Strong faith requires honesty. Requires honesty. I mentioned in verse 23 that Jairus' daughter is sick unto death. But what happened was Jairus is at a point that he knows he can't fix the problem. She's going to die. He needs help. I'm not so strong now. I can't come up with the solution myself. I can't take care of it. I need help. See, we like to appear tough and in control, especially us men, right? Hey, whatever the problem is, I'll figure it out. I'll handle it. I can do it. But what this is saying to us is we've got to be honest about it. And sometimes just consider there's times when it's beyond me. I've got to be honest with myself, and I've got to be honest with God. And then I can build strong faith in the person that really has the control and has the strength and has the power to fix that. But we've got to be honest about that and turn to the one that can. During this story of the 12-year-old girl, we actually get an interruption, right? Right in the middle of the story, all of a sudden there's a woman who's been struggling for 12 years. And so that's what we'll look at is that interruption to that story. But is there a tie-in to the fact that the girl was 12 years old and the woman's been struggling with the disease for 12 years? Do you think there's a connection? There's a meaning to the 12? Very well could be, but we'll save that for another day. Okay, let's go to number 3. Let's talk about that woman. Strong faith is preceded by a struggle. We all struggle. But if we're going to build our faith to be strong, that happens when we've worked through faith in God through a struggle. So faith, strong faith is preceded by a struggle. Let's go to verse 25 and just remind where we're at in the story. Verse 25, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. She'd been struggling for 12 years with a sickness, a chronic internal bleeding. Perhaps there was a tumor or some other disease. And doing a little research on that type of hemorrhaging or internal bleeding can cause one to go into shock. It can cause an inflammation issue. It can cause organ failure. It can cause death. At the very least, there's a tremendous amount of pain involved. And that's probably why in verse 26, she had spent all her money trying to fix it. And what happened? She'd spent all her money with how many doctors? And she's even worse. Hasn't gotten fixed. 12 years struggle. So think about that. What are you struggling with? What is there? Is there some sort of something in your life that you're struggling with in an ongoing thing? Sometimes it's chronic pain, whatever the case may be. Or even more to the point, what are you trying to take care of on your own? Because that's what she'd been doing for 12 years. Strong faith is preceded by a struggle. In other words, struggles can cause us to get serious about solutions. And then, what is a solution? Trusting someone that has the ability to fix or take me through the struggle. So strong faith is preceded by a struggle. Let's go to the next one. Strong faith requires God's intervention instead of my efforts. Verse 26 gives us that principle. The woman had spent all she had, treatment after treatment. Nobody could medically help her. And now she's at a dead end. What am I going to do? You know, I mentioned chronic pain, having chronic pain year after year. Wears you down. Some of you can attest to that. It affects your mood. It affects productivity. It can affect relationships. Takes all your money. Trying to take care of something like that all on your own efforts, that will wear you down. Why would you want to do it alone? Why would we want to do it alone? Rather than building strong faith in someone that can help. Because that faith requires God's intervention instead of just my own efforts. So strong faith requires us to reach out for intervention. Number 5, strong faith is preceded by a conviction. By a conviction. This is a good one. Go to verse 28. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. Conviction. She was convicted there was help. But only the person of Jesus was the one to help. But she had faith that he could give her victory. She had a conviction, just like Jairus had a conviction. What is a conviction? Conviction is being convinced and confident that something is true. Being convinced and being confident that something is true. So obviously we ask ourselves, am I convinced that Jesus is the one that can give me victory? Am I convinced of that? Because if I'm convinced of it, then I start buying into trusting Him, to leaning on Him, to have Him help me with that. Can He give me victory in a marriage struggle, in work dilemmas, in health challenges? Can He give us victory in controlling our finances? Can He give us victory in controlling any addictions, relationship issues, anger issues, whatever the case may be? Strong faith is preceded by a conviction, being convinced and confident that He is the solution. That conviction. Okay, number 6. Strong faith overcomes my fears. Now, I'll bet you there's several people here that could say, yeah, that one's worked for me before. Strong faith overcomes my fears. We see that in verses 33 and 34. Jesus, remember, asked, "Who touched me?" Verse 33, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed from your disease." So she was afraid. she's trembling because he wants to know who did this. But then the faith that she exercised in the right person melted away her fear. And what happens when the fear gets melted away? What replaces it? Peace. Peace. Don't we need peace? Don't we need peace in our very busy, tense, uptight culture and society? Strong faith gives us that peace. Strong faith overcomes my fears. Now, our last point about strong faith. Strong faith releases the power of God. It releases the power of God. And we see that in verses 29 and in 42. Both stories. The faith of Jairus, the father, and the faith of the woman did the same thing. It released the power of God. So let's pick up this story again and with the 12-year-old girl in verse 35. It says, while he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter's dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, but he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went into the house where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha Kumai," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking. Immediately she got up and began walking. Immediately God's power was released by the faith of these two people. How wonderful is that? How wonderful is that? How cool is it to witness God's power? Does that build your faith even more when you witness that? Even if you witness God's power happening in somebody else's life? So when we have praise time and somebody says, "Well, here's what God did this week," I can learn from that and that can strengthen my faith when that gets shared. So, in conclusion, what I'd like to do is go back to where we started this morning, and that is in 1 John chapter 5. I've got it up here. The verses that Jeannie read. Let's look at it. For whatever is born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Who is the one who overcomes the world? But he who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. So when you go to verse 4, who or what is born of God? The one that believes Jesus is the Son of God. Okay? Therefore, who's overcome the world? The one that believed that Jesus is the Son of God. That's who's overcome the world. Through what? Our faith. So, building strong faith does what? It helps us become an overcomer. You overcomers, you. Become an overcomer with strong faith, and you overcome the world. What does that mean? Overcome the world. Well, Satan has temporary charge over the world systems. We've learned that through Revelation so far, right? He's got temporary charge over the world systems, and he's doing that through deception. He's doing it through wickedness. Yet, this says that our faith overcomes this so that we can have victory and we can have peace amidst all that is around us. Now, I could give you a ton of illustrations, but I don't want to do that. What I would like to say is think back on your own examples. Think of your own experiences. Think of your own illustrations of when you just had to lean on the Lord and he came through. And remind yourself of those. And then listen to others. And Kathy and I have talked many times, man, we should have been keeping a journal or write a book or something, you know? And I'm sure many of you could say that same thing through your life. How many times you've just had to rely on the Lord and all of a sudden he came through in some situation and made such a difference in your life. Those are the things that we've got to share with each other, because that helps me know what happened in your case. So that strengthens my faith. And vice versa. I mean, we just share that stuff around and it helps. So rather than me share a bunch of illustrations, because I don't want to make a bunch of stories about myself today, but I want you to think back in your life. When has God done this for you? And then remind yourself of that, because it builds your faith. So the challenge presented to us today from these two situations and these two people in the book of Mark, the challenge is simple. Are we willing to build our faith? Are we willing to utilize the lessons here that's given to us? Strong faith is preceded by desperation. There are things in our lives that can bring us to the end of our rope, that can make us uptight, that can get us to the point that we're fit to be tied or on the verge of blowing up or just walking away from the situation. But that can cause negative responses, negative reactions, ruining relationships, turning to addictions, whatever. Will that desperation, will we allow it to build our faith? Will we let it? Number two, strong faith requires honesty. Will we be honest with ourselves, and will we be honest with the Lord that we can't handle this situation? You know, there's an old saying, well, if it's to be, it's up to me. Well, I tried to live according to that for a long time, and that caused a lot of tension because I couldn't always fix everything. So to be honest with myself and then be honest with God, I've got to rely on him. I've got to turn to him, and that helps build stronger faith. Number three, strong faith is preceded by a struggle. What will we do when we struggle? What will we do when we get frustrated? What will we do? Will we keep struggling? You know what the definition of insanity is, right? doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result? Will we turn to the Lord and exercise faith? That's doing something different. Number 4, strong faith requires God's intervention instead of my efforts. Let's use a struggle for God's work to build our faith in Him. It's easy to look for a way to fix things, and that's okay until it gets to a point that I'm not getting there and I'm struggling and now I'm getting uptight. That's when faith comes into play. And we've got to go a different direction. Number 5, strong faith is preceded by a conviction. A conviction is being convinced and confident that something is true. That's the basic definition. In this situation, the conviction is that I know that God can help me here. I know that I can rely on Him. So how confident are we that God can take care of our situations? Strong faith overcomes my fears. Fears can cause different things to happen. One of them is to freeze in place. For example, if you're on a mountain and all of a sudden you heard this huge noise and you look up and you see an avalanche coming towards you, that can cause you to freeze. Then what's going to happen? You're buried by a bunch of cold snow. So let the Lord overcome this fear instead, so that a proper reaction to fear happens, which is strong faith. And that last one, strong faith releases the power of God. As we see the power of God released, our convictions and faith build stronger and stronger and stronger. And then you come here, and when it's praise time, you share it with everybody else, and that helps everybody else build their faith. Okay? So will you focus on these 7 things this week? A little bit of a detour from Revelation, but building strong faith. We all need that every week. Let's pray.